be encouragement. There will be encouragement for innovation in the IKS also through grand national challenges, national competitions, hackathons, and incentivizing innovation. And the institutions may also access global collaborations for the same. Now, the institutions such as the Indian Council of Historical Research has been appointed right now for conducting the India-centric research, and initial seed funding will be provided for the establishment of the Indian Knowledge System centers by various higher education institutions. Also, it has been finalized that there will be approach to public through various mechanisms also to disseminate and popularize authentic IKS knowledge to develop informed and confident citizenry. People will also be involved in various IKS initiatives through Jan Bhagidari programs, which will be similar to the citizen science initiatives. And many more employment opportunities will also be created for the youth through certain skill-based programs, which will be created for these Indian knowledge systems. So this is what Indian knowledge systems have been provided as a vision for the contemporary India. Now I would be highlighting about what I actually want to figure out and explain you all in terms of Indian knowledge systems. So before beginning, we must know about the meaning of the word literature. And literature in India in the ancient times have been given specifically in the written works, especially those which were considered to be superior or which were having the lasting artistic merit. Now, in the context of India, where there is an unbroken living of the oral tradition with a history of more than at least 5,000 years, the meaning of literature for our present purpose has to be extended to mean composition to include the works composed and transmitted orally from generation to generation. So basically here I am talking about the literature which has been advocated in our ancient Indian works, like for example in the Vedas, in the various epics like Ramayana and Mahabharata. So all these are a part of our Indian knowledge systems only. Now, talking about the basic literature which has been created for the same, it has been classified into four basic categories. The first one is the Anvikshiki, second one is the Trayi, third is the Varta, and fourth one is the Dandaniti. So, talking about the Anvikshiki, this is used in the general sense of the contemporary science, which basically encompasses logic and philosophy. Of course, when we are talking about science and philosophy, we are talking about the general sense of science here. Next one is Trai, that is basically referring to the traditional knowledge of the Vedas. We know the four Vedas, and so the knowledge of Vedas is basically referred to as the Trai. Next one is the Varn. Now, Varn is basically used to represent wealth creation. And in the ancient times, when we talk about how the businessmen used to create the wealth, they used to create the wealth by way of agriculture and commerce. So that has been advocated under the literature Varn. And the last one which was being given was the Dandaniti. And Dandaniti is used to represent the politics and public administration. So this basically brings us to the fact that public administration and politics is one of the oldest field where the literature and the Indian knowledge systems of our contemporary India belong to. Now we'll talk about the classic literature of India, which is basically being mentioned in the form of classification of the four Vedas, which we all must be aware of, like Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Samveda, and Atharveda. Then the six Vedangas, namely the Shiksha, Kalp, Vyakaran, Chand, Niruktam, and the Jyotish. Then you have the Itihas, that is the history, which has been deeply incorporated under the Ramayana and Mahabharata and the Puran, like Vishnu Puran, Bhagavad Puran, and likewise. Then you have the Dharma Shastra in the form of Manusmriti, Yajnavalkya Smriti, the Parsar Smriti, etc. Then you have the Darshanas. These are actually the six orthodox and the six heterodox systems. We are going to discuss about these orthodox and heterodox systems in detail in the coming slides. And then you have Nyaya, which is basically the study of logic. Now, in other places, sometimes there are four Upvedas which have been mentioned, in which Ayurveda right now is very, very popular. We all know about it. Then you have Dhanurved, which has been very prominently mentioned in our Mahabharata, which is called as the archery. Then you have the Gandharv Ved, which talks about the dance and music. And then you have the Sthapatya Ved, which basically talks about the architecture. So basically, there are so many forms of literature, as you can see in the study which has been mentioned here. Now let's continue with the introduction to the Vedas, our Indian Vedas. And we all must know about the fact that Vedas of our country are the oldest surviving literary works in the whole world. And they are also sometimes referred to as Trayi. Remember when we began with the classification of the Indian knowledge system, I told that Vedas are referred to as Trayi. So there are basically three types of mantras in the Vedas. First is in the form of metrical compositions. Again, we are going to discuss them in detail, so not going into the further detail right now. Actually, these metrical compositions are in the form of prose, like in the form of stories. Okay. Then you have the others which are in the form of music. And the basic contribution goes to Bhagwan Vedvyas, who has compiled these Vedas into the four forms of Vedas, that is the Rig Ved, Yajur Ved, Sam Ved, and the Athar Ved. Talking about the Rig Ved is basically the collection of the basic mantras in the metrical form. Then you have the Yajur Ved, which is a collection of mantras in the form of proses, which I already told you that it is in the form of stories. Then you have Samved, which is a collection of the mantras which are set in the form of music. So to make it more interesting, they have been in the form of music. Then you have the Atharvaved, which came to be a collection of the mantras due to the Atharvaved and the Angiras. Now, in a few places, you'll see that the Brahman is said to consist of more than two subparts, like in the form of Aranyayak and the Upanishads. And as a result of which, many scholars say that Samhitas, Brahmanas, Upanishads, and Aranyayak are collectively those which make up the whole Vedas. So basically, the concept and dimension of the study which is undertaken in the literature of Vedas is very, very diverse. So if one wants to conduct a study on the concept of Vedas, he needs to, or he or she needs to have a very great or an in-depth study of the Vedas at large. Now, the experiences of the different mantras which we were talking about in the Vedas, they have been poured in the form of poetry, which came to be known as mantras. Like, for example, we have the Gayatri mantra. Okay, so they are an example of those mantras which have been formulated in the form of a poetry. This makes up the content of Vedas more interesting, basically. And each mantra is associated with many other forms also. Then it's very interesting to note here that the ways of recitation of the different poetry forms are preserved even to this day and is transmitted orally to those students who learn the Vedas traditionally at the Gurukul. So we all know that in the contemporary or in the modern India, this kind of education is not predominantly available. And that is why the government of India today is making an initiative of, making up these Indian knowledge systems more prominent and popular. Which we commonly call as the Bharatiya Gyan Parampara also. So the contribution of the ancient literature of the ancient times can be very largely understood by way it has originated by Bhagwan Ved Vyas in the ancient times. And that is what we have actually classified here as well. Now, talking about the different kind of recitations which have been given in the Vedas, it is in the form of the Samhiti, the Pad, the Kram, the Jata, and the Dhana. These are the different forms in which it has been given. And one is compelled at this point to compare the Indian culture of knowledge preservation with the cultures of the other parts of the world as well. So that's very interesting to know that Indian knowledge systems have derived their literature not just only from India but also from the other parts of the world. And because of that, it is also said that Bible was compiled somewhere 400 years after the crucifixion of Jesus Christ at a council headed by Emperor Constantine, where Gospels were added to the Bible, whereas certain other inconvenient Gospels were omitted. So you can see that even in the other religions, like the Hindu religion also, you'll find that the ancient literature comprises of the Indian knowledge system as well. Then similarly in the Quran also, the Quran was compiled by the Abbasis about 300 years after the death of Prophet Muhammad, and whenever there was a multiple conflicting versions, the version with the dialect of the Quran Sharif and the Quran tribe was retained and others were destroyed. So once the Bible and Quran were first frozen, like it was secured, all other versions were destroyed. And so even in these two religions, just like in our religion, we have the different Upanishads, the Vedas in the Hindu religion. Similarly, in the Bible and the Quran, also those parts or those literary works which were not worthwhile at that point of time were omitted, and the records were frozen. Now, some people were under the assumption that the Quran contains all knowledge and truth that is worth knowing, went about burning the libraries in Alexandria and other places. In India, Bakhtiyar Khilji ransacked the Nalanda and Vikramaditya universities and proceeded to burn their libraries also. And it is said that the library burned for 7 days. So imagine how much of literature must have been destroyed at that particular point of time. Otherwise, our Indian knowledge systems in the today's point of time would have been all the more extensive in that field. Now, in addition to this, most of the people who memorized the Quran were warriors, and once they were killed in the battle, the knowledge of the Quran and other related literature would be lost. But in the Indian culture, people who were into knowledge production and preservations were exempted from the military duties, because at that point of time also the Indian knowledge systems were given a very, very due weightage, which was very much required. And that was a time when the education was given in the Gurukuls, and therefore the education was which was given about these literary works which we discussed earlier, that is about the Vedas and the Vedangas, that was very prominent and very important. So the people who were working on the literature of this particular field were relieved from the other duties so that they can focus and concentrate on the formulation of the literature in these particular segments. Now let's get on to the details of Veda and Vedangas. And about the Vedas, as I mentioned earlier, that Vedas are a collection of the poetic mantras which were pouring out the recitations and the experiences of many, many aspects. Now, what were the experiences about? These experiences were about the sun, the moon, the stars, the planets, the comets, etc. Then they also contain a description about the flora and fauna which were around the forests, about the deserts, the rivers, the seas, and the oceans. It was also about the people around, to their own physical body, to their breath, to their mind, to their intellect and ego, and to the inner self witnessing the whole thing. And the subject matter spoken in the Vedas is vast, and that is why you can see that the meaning cannot be deciphered exactly. Like if you, whatever I mentioned right now, I think you can very well make out now that this particular literature which was given in the poetry form comprised of everything which is present in our external environment, ranging from the flora and fauna, ranging to the experiences of the people around, ranging to the experiences about the universe, and many more things likewise. So the scope and the dimension of knowledge which our Vedas have offered to us is very, very large, which is it is very, very extensive as well. Now, talking about the Vedas further, we can say that the meaning cannot be easily deciphered, as I told you. This is because of the face of the natural calamities at that time, the famine, the floods, the mice migrations which happened at that particular point of time, due to which there are breaks in the knowledge. I mean, whenever you go through these Vedas, one limitation which you will find is that there is a breakage in the knowledge because of these, unforeseen situations or the natural calamities that had existed at that particular point of time. So, therefore, the subject matter of the Vedas basically the subject matter of the Vedas basically deal with the integral part of the nature actually as to how things are and not created by the human beings. So you can say that the subject matter of the Vedas is very logical and it is very real also in all these senses. Okay. So the particular matter which you are going through in the Vedas is Vastunisht and not Vyaktinisht. This basically means that it is not influenced by the opinions of the people around, but it is in the form of the Vastunisht or the objective information which was available and which was mentioned in the Vedas as it was at that particular point of time. So this basically makes the knowledge and the literature which is available in the Vedas all the more authentic than the actual information which could have been made available at that particular point of time. Now, talking about the breadth of the topics which are covered in the Vedas, that can be obtained from the Chandayo, okay, which is given in the Upanishads of the Samved, where Narad ji approaches the Sanat Kumar saying that he knows the four Vedas, the Itihas, the Puran, the Vyavhar, the Kalp, the Ganit, Dev, Nidhi Shastra, Niti Shastra, and all the other aspects. Now, talking about the first one which has been mentioned under the Vedas, we are talking about the classification of the various Upanishads now. Okay, we will be talking about the first one, that is Jyotish. So normally the name Nagar was associated with the Vedanga Jyotish. Now we are talking about the Vedangas. Remember that for the Vedas we have got extensive knowledge and we know that it's very logical and it is objectively made. It's not subjective. It is not influenced by the opinions. Now we have moved forward to the next one, that is the Vedangas. So first we are talking about the Jyotish, and numerous contributions you can say to this field have been made by many people like Aryabhat, okay, then Varamihir and many other people who have made contributions in this field. Then you have the Vyakaran, and for this, thanks to his different contributions which have been made in this particular field, which has made it all the more worthwhile. Now, in terms of Vyakaran, it is said that there are several original contributions of Panini, who is foremost among all in the use of the meta language or the formal language in the today's terminology, and the concept of karak, which has essentially opened up a new field of study called the computational linguistics, enabling the machine translation is one of those fields where you can see that the Indian knowledge system has revolutionized at the present day point of time. Further, one can also see the seeds of algorithms in the Panini Sutra. So you can see that the contribution of these Indian knowledge systems is not just concentrated to any one field of knowledge, it is concentrated to all the fields of knowledge, including agriculture, commerce, science, mathematics, and so on. So, based on these Panini Sutras, Katyayan gave the Vartikas. Now, what are Vartikas? These are the additional statements which describe some cases which were not covered by the Sutras. And Patanjali gave the detailed commentary based on the critical analysis of this language. Next, we'll move on to the Niruktas. Niruktas are basically the oldest surviving text of Nirukta, which was given by Yash. Now, Nirukta covers the etymology and is the systematic creation of a glossary, which discusses how to understand the uncommon words. Although not classified under Nirukta, notable contributions were later made in the general field so that a dictionary could be framed and where synonymous words could be understood by the people referring to it. Next Vedanga is the Chandas. These are the oldest extant work on which were given by under the Pingla's Chanda Sutra, which while a much later work is Kedar Bhatt's Ratnapriya, and the most exhaustive compilations of Sanskrit prosody describe over 600 meters, the highest for any language with a tradition of metrical compositions. Then next one is the Shiksha. Now Shiksha deals with the phonetics. We are talking about the ancient times, so here it is dealing with the phonetics. And since the Vedas were transmitted orally through a Guru Shishya Parampara, Shiksha became very important at that point of time. And there one could cite differences in the utterances of different syllables in different branches of the Vedas. And hence those are covered in what are known as the Pratisakhyas. However, Panini Shiksha gives a very brief knowledge for most practical purposes also. And at this juncture, one may note how even the native speakers of Tamil are unable to correctly pronounce some of the letters unique to Tamil. This could be attributed to a neglect of this branch of knowledge. See, what happens is we are talking about the ancient literature, which was trying to summarize the phonetics and the language belonging to every area, to every origin, or to every region of India. But if we talk about the practical aspects of how to incorporate all this in the literature, it was not practically possible. And therefore, you may find that uh, you cannot incorporate all the languages into the system when you are developing certain phonetics, you are developing certain poetry, or you are developing certain other aspects of the language into the system, whether it is in the form of a prose, whether it is in the form of poetry. It's not practically possible to implement everything into the system. However, the attempts which have been made in order to promote the education in the form of this fifth Vedanga, which I was talking about right now, that is Shiksha, were, they played a very important role, or they made a very major contribution in the development of the Indian knowledge system at large at that particular point of time. Next, the sixth one, the sixth Vedanta, which we are talking about right now, is going to be the Kalpa Sutra. Now, Kalpa Sutras include the Shrut Sutras, which systematize the Vedic rituals, the Grihastha Sutras, which talks about the various rituals which are to be performed by a Grihast by himself, along with his wife. I mean, after marriage, whatever rituals are required to be performed. Then you have the Dharma Sutras, which include the various religious duties which are to be performed. And then you have the Silva Sutras, which discuss the construction of various fire altars, which literally where literally silver means the thread. Thread here basically means, connecting link of the different phases of the life, you can say, because it is talking about what religious rituals you are supposed to perform. Then what are the grahast rules which are you are supposed to perform. So basically, all the practical aspects of living a particular life by an individual have been covered into this particular aspect. So this is about the Vedanga. So till now, under the Indian knowledge system, what we have tried to discuss is about the Vedas and the Vedangas. Now we'll move on to the Itihas and the Puran. I think many of us might be familiar with the terms of Itihas and Puran, and let's discuss them now. Now, a popular saying in the tradition is Itihas Puranabhyam Vedam Brahmayat. That is, the Vedic virtues and values are to be communicated through Itihas and Puran. See, that this is a story or this is a content we are talking about from the ancient point of time. So somewhere or the other, when you want to convey about your virtues, the values which you want to carry from generation to generation, where you are going to get it, you are going to get it by way of the history which has been given in the various Ved, in the various literary books, the Vedic books which have been created for the same. Okay. Now, although the literal meaning of itihas is itihasa, so this basically means what? Does it happen? This basically means that whatever had happened in the past period of time, that has been advocated by way of this itihas. Talking about the foremost work of itihas is the Mahabharata, which has 1 lakh verses in itself and is also regarded as the fifth Veda and also a kavya. Okay, that is in the form of a poetry. Now, unlike the Vedas, there is a single storyline running through the Itihas in both the Ramayana and Mahabharata and is therefore much more popular than the Vedas. See, when we are talking about the Vedas, we are talking about the mannerism and way of living, and we are talking about the logics which are applicable in the present day point of time as well. But when we are talking about the Itihas and the Quran which have been made, we are talking about the two important Quran which are working on this, and they are basically the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. And since they have a common storyline, so we can see that in the present point of time also, they are very popular, they are very worthwhile, and people always take a deep sense of belongingness and interest in going through the innate details which have been mentioned in both the Ramayana and the Mahabharata also. Talking about the Puran of India, the Puran of India are numerous. It's not just one or two, they are numerous in number. And we identify our Indian tradition by way of these Puranas only. So there are basically 18 main Puranas and 18 Up-Purans. That is sub-Purans. If we talk about them in English, they are called as the Up-Puranas. Then the most prominent among the Puran is the Vishnu Puran. Okay. Then you have the Bhagavad Puran with certain skandhas, Skand Puran. Now, Skand Puran is also something which is very popular in the Hindu religion right now, and you will find it is having 81,000 verses, which is the biggest among all the Puran. And the Puranas are not as well preserved as the Vedas, and hence you may find that there is a possibility that some interpolations may have crept in into the Puranic text. So unlike Vedas, you can say that the originality of these Purans may also be in question, because some verses of these Purans may be, not present in their original form. So it may definitely happen. Okay. So this was about the Itihas and Puran. People become very keen and generate a lot of interest in identifying and understanding these Puranas also. Now we'll move on to the next sector, that is the Dharma Shastra. Now, talking about the Dharma Shastra, it deals with the following main items. First one is the Achar, which basically deals with the actions or practices of an individual. Okay, like for example, how an individual conducts the Sandhya Vandana, the Jap, the Puja, the Yajna, Dan, Tap. So, whatever kind of rituals we follow in our Indian religious system, all that have been mentioned under the Achar Shastra, which basically advocates what all practices we are supposed to follow when we are a part of a particular religion. What kind of rituals we follow in order to, pursue certain religious practices for our deities, to the people, to the gods who we pray for, or the rituals we perform for them. So all those yajna, the jap, the pujas which we perform, they are in the first part of the Dharma Shastra, that is the Achar. Now, the benefits of these different rituals which you are performing under your religion, they cannot be, their benefits cannot be validated. I basically mean to say that you cannot validate or verify, or you cannot actually say that, for example, if you are performing a particular kind of jap, or if you are performing for example, a particular kind of sandhya aarti, what is the direct benefit which you are going to get out of it? But yes, people do say or do believe that whatever conviction they have in performing these different achars or different activities as a form of their rituals, they feel or they believe that it is going to have a long lasting positive impact on their life. But yes, the practice, as I said, that the practitioner or the person who practices all these kinds of activities or all these kind of rituals or actions, they can only say on the basis of their own conviction whether it has been successful or not. Like for example, if I am performing any kind of puja, I myself should have a confidence or a conviction on my end that whatever I am doing is going to help me out or is going to benefit me in some or the other way. So that is what I have to believe. It's basically about the belief of an individual, how he or she reacts to or believes out of any particular activity or action or ritual which he or she is performing. So this is the first part of the Dharma Shastra, that is the Achar. Second is the Vyavhar. You must have seen that when people are, talking about any individual, or if we talk about the personality of an individual, what kind of personality an individual actually has, one very important part of the personality trait of an individual, or when we believe that a particular person is very knowledgeable or is having a good level of intellect, we say that the achar and vyavhar of that person is very good. This basically means that the actions and behavior of the person is very good. And that is why we say that they contribute to the development and learning of that person to a very great extent. So that is why under the Dharma Shastra, this achar and vyavhar has been given a very important weightage. So we are talking about the second one right now, and that is vyavhar. Now, what is Vyavhar? Vyavhar basically deals with all those actions which are to be done while we are behaving or dealing with others in the society. So, Vyavhar is basically the do's and don'ts which are advocated to an individual whenever he or she is a part of the society. Okay. Next one is very important. I think most of us must have heard about it, and that is Prashchit. Prashchit is what? Prashchit is the remedial action which we take if we find that our actions are not done properly. Like, for example, if a person is very, very religious, okay, he is very, very devotional, and he has been into the habit of performing a Sandhya Aarti or a Sandhya ritual every day. But someday, if he is not able to perform that ritual, then he is going to conduct a Prashchit on the same. That is, he is offer his prayers to correct his actions which he might not have been able to perform at a particular point of time. Next one is the dand. Dand basically means punishment. So we all know what dand is. Dand is the punishment or fine which is levied for slippages in your vyavhar. So what did we see? Prayashchit is done for not following your actions or your achar, and dand is something which is practiced when you are not following your vyavhar. So these two, that is prayashchit and dand, are dependent upon the two, that is achar and vyavhar. So as I said, that dand basically refers to the punishment or fine which is levied for the slippages in the vyavhar. Like, for example, as I gave you the example also, that, for example, if you are not performing your rituals properly, like, for example, if you are supposed to perform a puja every day, or you were supposed to perform a yajna every fortnight, okay, and you are not able to do so, then you have skipped a part of your achar and vyavhar. So what you may do, you may try to give yourself a punishment by skipping your breakfast or dinner, by performing any kind of prashut because you delayed some kind of ritual or action which you were supposed to perform. So this is how these four aspects of Dharma Shastra, that is Achar, Vyavhar, Prashchit and Dand, are related to one another. Next, we are going to talk about the darshanas. What are the different darshanas? Now, although many people translate the darshanas into philosophy, it is not really satisfying as an etymologically devised word. Philos means loved or means wisdom, which essentially means that love for wisdom, whereas darshana is much more than that. It is not just something which you are offering for your beloved or loving. Literally, darshana means vision and may be called as a system of thought, which is very importantly propounded under the vision of the truth of existence. And those darshanas which accept the different aspects into a valid source of knowledge, they are available in the form of darshanas which have been given into two forms. Okay, one is known as the astic darshanas and second is known as the nastic darshanas. Okay, first is the astic darshanas and second is the nastic darshanas. So astics are who? The people who belong to a heterogeneous field. You remember when I was discussing with you in the introductory part about the Indian knowledge systems, I told you that there are two parts. One is the heterodox, homogeneous, and the other one is the heterodox. Under this first one, you have the Astic or the Orthodox people who believe in the ancient mythological experiences which the people had, and they belong to the category of people who believe in God. Okay, so they basically have been categorized into Nyaya, then Vesika, then Sankhya, then Yoga, then Purvamimamsa, then Uttar Mimamsa. So this is something which belongs to the orthodox category. I repeat once again, we are talking about the darshanas. Darshanas are basically the philosophies of life. That is how you perceive life or with what wisdom you are perceiving your life. So this has been categorized into two categories. One is the orthodox one and the second one is the heterodox one. When we are talking about the orthodox one, I repeat that there are six aspects of the same, that is Nyaya, then Vesika, then Sankhya, then Yoga, then Purva Mimamsa, and then Uttar Mimamsa. Then there are other darshanas which do not accept the Ved also as a valid means of knowledge. So those who do not believe in the Vedas, like the four Vedas which we discussed about, like your Rig Ved, Sam Ved, Yajur Ved, and Athar Ved. So the people who believe in these are called as the Astic ones. Okay, and the people who do not believe in this are the Nastic ones. So those who are the heterodox ones, or those who are in the Nastic Darshnas, they have six canonical darshanas which are identified in the form of Sautantrika, Vaibhashika, Yogakara, Madhyamamika, Shvetam. Okay, so these are heterodox believers who believe in the philosophy of Gnostic Darshanams. Okay, so this is something about the Astics and the Gnostics and the contribution of the Vedas and the different aspects or fields of knowledge. So basically, in this particular part of Indian knowledge systems, I tried to highlight, or the basic overview which I was trying to tell you all was that our Indian knowledge systems belong to the ancient period of time, and the major contribution which has been there in our Indian knowledge system has the one which has been given by, first of all, our Vedas, then something which has been given by our Vedangas, then Itihas, then Puran, then our Upanishads, okay, then the different Upanishads or the different aspects which have been given under the same, the rituals, the actions which have been propagated. So these basically advocate that Indian knowledge systems are not something which is to be highlighted in the contemporary or modern India only. We are talking about the Indian knowledge systems which date back to thousands of years ago. Okay, and they are actually connected to the Bharatiya Gyan Parampara, to the Indian system of knowledge. And in the today's point of time, the Ministry of Education of India has recognized or highlighted the importance of this Indian knowledge system. And the Ministry of Education has also advocated nowadays that this Indian knowledge system has to, compulsorily belong to or be incorporated under the Indian system of education as well. And that is why there is an Indian knowledge system division which has been made by the Ministry of Education. Talking about its formation, so this Indian knowledge systems division under the Ministry of Education was established in the month of October in 2020. And the basic vision of this Indian knowledge system is to promote interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research on all the aspects of IKS, to preserve and disseminate a deeper understanding and appreciation for the Indian knowledge system for further research and societal applications. So basically, what the present Indian knowledge systems is trying to do is, it is trying to highlight that how the ancient Indian knowledge systems can be preserved, how you can conduct research so that you can know more about the ancient history, the ancient times when the Indian knowledge systems were present, and also to preserve and disseminate or distribute this information to the younger generation of today. And that is why right now in the contemporary education system, you will find that the Indian knowledge systems have become an integral or important part of the same. Now, this IKS division supports and funds the establishment of IKS centers. IKS centers mean the Indian knowledge centers, which are both interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary. And they basically motivate the people to conduct research to know more about the Indian knowledge system. Now, this particular division, that is the Indian Knowledge Division, what it does is it conducts internship programs for the undergraduate systems, in addition to conducting faculty development programs, like you see that you all are a part of faculty development program, because we all want you people to be also aware of this Indian knowledge system and young crowd of people whom you are also educating, because you all, I think, are belonging to this category as well. You all are educators as well. So in order to disseminate the information, different faculty development programs are arranged, different workshops have been arranged, text mining is done nowadays. What do you mean by text mining? Text mining is basically harnessing or getting as much text and as much knowledge about the Indian knowledge system which existed in the past period of time. Then there are certain documentation projects which have been conducted, and many outreach activities are also conducted by this Indian knowledge system in partnership with the other institutions as well. Also, additionally, this division initiated the IKS wiki portal for article publishing also in various Indian languages, so as to foster a broader dissemination and engagement of the traditional knowledge towards the people. Also, you'll find that the main objective of this Indian knowledge system division is to go beyond merely acknowledging the existence of the Indian knowledge system, and also to rejuvenate and mainstream it by integrating it into the fabric of our education research ecosystem for the contemporary world. So, you can see that the basic objective of this particular Indian knowledge system division right now is to disseminate the information that Indian knowledge system is not something new. It is something which has been existing into the knowledge system since a very long period of time, and therefore it should be disseminated all around the world. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to integrate or collaborate the all this ancient knowledge which I discussed about, that is Vedas, Vedantas, Upanishads, and all into the overall system of education. So also you can say that these Indian knowledge systems are trying to bridge the gap between the traditional Indian knowledge system and the contemporary knowledge system. Right now, the knowledge system which we are working upon is the skill-based system. Like after the initiation of the national education policy, now you can see that the education system right now is skill-based. But what about the knowledge system which existed in the past period of time? The present youth of our country as well as the youth around the world is unaware about how much contribution the Indian knowledge systems have already made in the past period of time. And that is why this Indian knowledge system is trying to integrate this traditional aspect of Indian knowledge with the contemporary knowledge. It is trying to bridge the gap between the two. But what happens is that if you are going to do so, you are going to cultivate a living tradition of the Indian system, which will foster the creation of new knowledge and will inspire the development of future innovators. And you can have many new scholars who are going to work on research on the basis of the Indian paradigms of knowledge generation and transmission. You will find that in most of the areas, whether it is agriculture, whether it is science, whether it is commerce, or whether it is any other area of knowledge, you will find that the research is majorly conducted on the contemporary areas of working. But nobody or very few people bother about how the ancient knowledge system had worked upon. So this particular Indian knowledge system also wants the researchers or the new scholars to work upon the paradigms of knowledge which existed in the past period of time. So, whatever discussion or whatever knowledge had been advocated in the past period of time, that was not sufficient enough, it was spent, and therefore, IKS division is now focusing on three fundamental principles whenever any activity is undertaken, or whenever any workshop is undertaken, or whenever any other fundamental practice is undertaken. So the IKS division or the Indian Knowledge System division of the Ministry of Education is basically focusing on three areas right now. One is the parampara. Parampara is what? Parampara is basically when you embrace the rich heritage and the lineage of the Indian knowledge system. So here what happens is the IKS division is aiming to uphold and carry forward the wisdom and the knowledge of the ancient time, which could be passed on from one generation to another. So here the here the goal of the Indian knowledge system is to highlight the continuous unbroken knowledge traditions of the ancient India, that is Bharat, since the time immemorial, like the time which existed. Next one is the drishti. Second principle of the Indian knowledge system is drishti. So here the Indian knowledge system offers a unique perspective which makes this knowledge system Bharatiya, that is Indian, and which holds an immense value in addressing the contemporary and emerging challenges in this segment. And as I said earlier also, that by combining the traditional wisdom with the modern knowledge, we can find holistic solutions which will transcend the limitations of the other approaches as well. Last one is the Lokik Pariyojana. Now, what is Lokik Pariyojana? Here, the Indian Knowledge System Division basically aims to highlight the practical utility of the Indian knowledge system so that it can be used to solve the current and emerging problems of India and the world. So it basically focuses on the areas of societal importance. Now, what are the areas of societal importance right now? Like, for example, working on the health, working on the technology advancement, and social well-being. So the IKS projects in the present day point of time strive to make a tangible difference, that is, notable difference in the contemporary world by mainstreaming the Indian knowledge system. So these are the three major principles on which the Indian knowledge system is basically working. So basically, to conclude, I can say that Indian knowledge system is a field or a factor of or an aspect of study which is very, very relevant, which is very, very prominent and very much required in the present day point of time. Because as I was talking earlier also, that the present day youth or the modern youth is more concentrated towards the contemporary issues. And we as people have forgotten the ancient history, the ancient literature, and the ancient inscriptions which have been there with us for a very long period of time. So the today's Indian knowledge system is very, very important or very crucial so that we can bridge the gap between the present knowledge system and collaborate it with the or integrate it with the ancient knowledge system and then work together in order to conduct better research, work on the dimensions and explore a world of knowledge, which integrates both the traditional knowledge system as well as the modern knowledge system. So I think we all should be a part of this Indian knowledge system, and we all should work together wholeheartedly to bring a greater detail or a dimension towards the knowledge systems of India. So that's all what I wanted to say on the Indian knowledge system. If anybody has any query or anybody wants to ask anything, you are most welcome to ask. Otherwise, that's all for the session for today.